Imagine this scenario. World War II's bloodiest battlefields, and the sound that struck the most fear wasn't the thunder of cannons or the staccato of bullets, but the clear, consistent dialogue of American troops synchronizing their next move. Picture German tank crews sealed within their metal fortresses, suddenly tuning into perfectly intelligible English conversations broadcasting on their radios. Tank commanders were overheard discussing targets, requesting artillery support, and orchestrating flanking maneuvers, all happening in real time, all audible to anyone tuned to the correct frequency. This wasn't a breakdown in communication. It was the Sherman tank's most significant tactical edge, concealed in plain sight. Today, we unravel the untold account of how America's most extensively produced tank not only advanced across Europe, but fundamentally spoke its way to triumph, one radio transmission at a time. While the Germans engineered superior armor and larger armaments, the Americans forged something far more potent, a cohesive network capable of strategic thought, synchronized action, and unified assault. The M4 Sherman medium tank saw its combat debut in North Africa in late 1942. By the war's conclusion, more than 49,000 of these robust steel workhorses had rolled off American assembly lines. However, here's a detail often overlooked. Every single Sherman tank manufactured was outfitted with what were arguably the most advanced radio systems globally at that juncture. A pivotal moment occurred during the Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. British units employing American-built Shermans alongside their own tanks made a remarkable discovery. While German panzers still largely depended on flag signals and visual cues for coordination, Sherman crews were engaged in comprehensive tactical discussions that spanned miles of the battlefield. German intelligence intercepts from that period documented their escalating apprehension regarding what they termed the American talking machines. The genesis of this transformative capability stemmed not solely from American industrial might, but from a profound alteration in strategic thinking. Where German tank doctrine championed individual valor and unparalleled engineering, American doctrine placed its entire wager on coordination, communication, and collective effort. The narrative commences not in a tank fabrication plant, but within the offices of the U.S. Army Signal Corps in 1940. As America observed the conflagration engulfing Europe, military planners recognized a critical verity. Modern warfare would be dictated by the entity most adept at synchronizing its forces. The German Blitzkrieg's success wasn't attributed to superior tanks, but rather to superior communication and coordination. Yet a significant challenge persisted. Early American tanks, such as the M3 Lee, possessed radios, but these were rudimentary, unreliable, and struggled to communicate even with adjacent vehicles within the same unit, let alone with infantry or artillery. Tank crews frequently resorted to hand signals or dismounting to convey messages, a perilous undertaking in active combat. The breakthrough emerged from analyzing German shortcomings in Russia. American intelligence officers noted that German tank formations, despite their individual prowess, often became isolated and disoriented during prolonged engagements. The Wehrmacht's rigid command structure meant that the severance of radio contact rendered entire panzer divisions functionally blind, compelling them to make tactical decisions based on obsolete information. Colonel Adna R. Chaffee Jr., often hailed as the progenitor of American armored doctrine, perceived the opportunity. He posited in a classified memorandum in 1941 that the tank of the future will not be judged by the thickness of its armor or the power of its gun, but by its ability to see, hear, and coordinate with every other element of the combined arms team. This was more than mere military theory. It represented a fundamental re-envisioning of mechanized warfare. The solution originated from an unexpected domain, American automotive innovation. While German engineers focused on enhancing armor plating and weapon systems, American designers applied the very principles that ensured automobile reliability and user-friendliness to military communication. They developed the SCR-508 SCR-528 and SCR-538 radio systems. These were compact, dependable, frequency-modulated radios capable of maintaining clear communication even as the tank traversed the terrain at full speed, navigating the electrical interference generated by its own engine. The engineering hurdles were substantial. Radio technology in 1941 relied on vacuum tubes, which were inherently fragile and consumed considerable power. The vibrations from a tank's engine and tracks could shatter these tubes, while the vehicle's electrical systems produced interference that garbled communications. American engineers surmounted these obstacles through innovative shock mounting, enhanced shielding, and crucially, the transition to FM radio technology, which offered superior resistance to interference compared to the AM systems employed by most other nations. The Sherman's radio superiority signified a fundamental philosophical divergence in how Americans and Germans approached warfare. German tank doctrine was predicated on the concept of the lone wolf, the accomplished panzer ace capable of unilaterally altering the course of a battle through superior equipment and individual skill. German tanks were indeed mechanical marvels, but they operated as independent entities. American doctrine, by contrast, was revolutionary in its elegant simplicity. Transform every tank into an integral component of a larger, interconnected organism. The SCR-508 radio system could transmit across 10 distinct FM channels and receive on 20, boasting a range of 15 miles when stationary and 7 miles while in motion. More significantly, it seamlessly integrated with the tank's intercom system, enabling the 5-man crew to function as a cohesive unit while concurrently maintaining contact with other tanks, infantry elements, and command structures. This wasn't merely about possessing superior equipment, it was about forging a new paradigm of warfare. German intercepted radio traffic from Normandy vividly illustrates their mounting frustration with American tactics. German commanders lamented that American tank units appeared to possess an almost supernatural grasp of battlefield conditions, calling for artillery support with pinpoint accuracy, executing flanking maneuvers with surgical precision, and preempting threats before they materialized. The technical specifications, while informative, only tell part of the story. The Sherman's radio systems were engineered with redundancy as a core principle. Command tanks were equipped with additional SCR-506 radios, enabling battalion commanders to monitor higher command frequencies while simultaneously maintaining communication with their own units. The BC-604 transmitter could operate on multiple power settings, allowing for conservation of battery life during extended operations while providing maximum range when circumstances demanded. However, perhaps the most groundbreaking element was the integration of the intercom system with the radio network. Within a Sherman, the tank commander could communicate privately with individual crew members via the BC-606 interphone control boxes or address the entire crew concurrently. With a simple flick of a switch, he could engage in dialogue with other tanks in his platoon, request artillery bombardment, or communicate with regimental headquarters. This unparalleled level of communication flexibility was unprecedented in armored warfare. The psychological ramifications of this communication network extended far beyond mere tactical advantages. Sherman crews developed an almost telepathic understanding of battlefield dynamics. Tank commanders could perceive not only the events directly affecting their vehicle, but also the broader situation unfolding across the entire front. They could listen to artillery observers directing fire missions, hear infantry units calling for support, and monitor the communications of other tank crews facing similar challenges. German tank crews, conversely, often fought in communicative isolation. Their panzer crews might engage enemy tanks without any awareness of nearby friendly forces, the availability of artillery support, or even whether their actions aligned with the overarching tactical plan. This isolation fostered both extraordinary individual initiative, leading to the emergence of legendary tank aces, and a degree of tactical confusion that American forces adeptly exploited. The practical implications of the Shermans' communication superiority became starkly evident during the breakout from Normandy in July 1944. Operation Cobra, the massive offensive that shattered German defensive lines, succeeded not due to superior American tank armor or firepower, but because thousands of Sherman crews could synchronize their movements in real time. Consider the tactical revolution this represented. A Sherman tank commander could simultaneously converse with his own crew through the intercom, coordinate with other units, request artillery support from divisional headquarters, and call for close air support, all while advancing at 25 miles per hour through enemy territory. German tank crews, in contrast, often relied on visual signals and pre-established plans that became obsolete the moment enemy contact was made. The Battle of Araucourt in September 1944 serves as a prime illustration of this synchronized action. The 4th Armored Division, equipped with Sherman tanks, confronted elements of the German 5th Panzer Army in what should have been a drastically mismatched engagement. German forces held numerical superiority and possessed formidable firepower, including the dreaded Panther tanks, which could engage Shermans at ranges where American guns were ineffective. However, the Americans possessed an asset the Germans lacked: comprehensive battlefield awareness. Sherman crews could overhear radio chatter from reconnaissance units pinpointing German movements. They listened as artillery observers directed preliminary bombardments. They coordinated with tank destroyer units to establish kill zones where German armor would be funneled into prepared ambushes. When hostilities commenced, it wasn't a series of individual tank versus tank confrontations. It was a meticulously coordinated American response that anticipated German maneuvers and concentrated overwhelming firepower at critical junctures. The statistics underscore the disparity. American armored divisions in 1944 could coordinate the movements of hundreds of vehicles across dozens of miles of front. German panzer divisions, despite their superior individual tanks, were hampered by communication range and reliability limitations. A Tiger tank might destroy 5 Shermans in a direct engagement, but those 5 Shermans had already called in the artillery strike that would neutralize the Tiger minutes later. The Shermans' communication network also facilitated an unprecedented level of combined arms integration. American doctrine emphasized seamless cooperation between tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support. The radio systems made this cooperation feasible in ways that German forces could scarcely comprehend. An American tank commander under fire could simultaneously request specific artillery targets, direct his own unit's movements, and coordinate with supporting infantry, all through the same unified radio network. This coordination advantage cascaded throughout the American military structure. Regimental commanders could monitor the radio traffic of their subordinate units, gaining an immediate understanding of battlefield conditions. Division commanders could reallocate reserves based on real-time tactical developments, rather than relying on delayed written reports. The entire American war machine evolved into a more responsive, adaptable, and aware entity than any military force in history. The Shermans' communication advantage came at a considerable cost and presented vulnerabilities that German forces were quick to exploit. The very openness of American radio communications became a potential weakness. German signals intelligence units routinely intercepted Sherman tank communications, gleaning valuable information about American intentions, unit deployments, and tactical strategies. More critically, the emphasis on communication fostered dependencies that could be leveraged. German forces developed sophisticated jamming techniques and began targeting American radio antennas. Consequently, a Sherman with a damaged radio antenna was not merely isolated, but tactically incapacitated, severed from the coordination network that underpinned American tactics. The most tragic instance occurred during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. German forces launched their surprise offensive, partly by exploiting their knowledge of American communication patterns. By jamming radio frequencies and broadcasting deceptive radio messages in English, German commanders sowed confusion within American units that had become excessively reliant on their communication infrastructure. Sherman crews, accustomed to constant radio chatter and synchronized operations, found themselves disoriented when their radios fell silent or transmitted contradictory information. The system also highlighted inter-service cultural friction within the American military. Infantry units equipped with different radio systems, operating on disparate frequencies, often found themselves unable to communicate directly with the tanks they were intended to support. A notable transcript from Okinawa, where a U.S. destroyer offshore recorded tank communications during a battle, reveals the palpable frustration of crews struggling to coordinate with infantry units just a few hundred yards distant, necessitating message relays through battalion headquarters. Some critics argued that the intense focus on communication rendered American tank crews overly reliant on higher command, potentially diminishing their capacity for independent action compared to their German counterparts. German tank aces, like Michael Wittmann or Kurt Knispel, operated with a degree of tactical autonomy that American doctrine generally discouraged. When communication networks faltered, American units occasionally struggled to adapt, lacking the individual initiative that characterized highly effective German tank crews. Technological constraints were equally significant. The Shermans' radio systems, while cutting edge for their era, were still based on vacuum tube technology, which was both fragile and power-intensive. Extended operations could deplete batteries, leaving crews without communication precisely when it was most critical. The radios also added considerable weight and complexity to the tank, reducing ammunition capacity and requiring specialized maintenance that was not always readily available in forward positions. Adverse weather conditions could render the communication advantage moot. Heavy rainfall, dense fog, or atmospheric interference could impede radio signals, compelling Sherman crews to revert to visual communication methods for which they had not been extensively trained. German crews, schooled in independent operation, often performed more effectively under such circumstances than American crews who had grown dependent on continuous radio contact. The Shermans' radio systems represented something far greater than a mere tactical advantage. They embodied a fundamental shift in America's approach to technological challenges. While German engineering pursued perfection in individual components, American engineering prioritized effectiveness through integration and mass production. This philosophy extended beyond radios to encompass every facet of Sherman design. The tank was conceived not as the ultimate individual fighting machine, but as the most effective component within a larger military apparatus. Standardized parts, simplified maintenance procedures, and integrated systems meant that a damaged Sherman could be rapidly repaired and redeployed as part of the synchronized network. The psychological impact on German forces was profound. Intercepted Wehrmacht communications from late 1944 reveal growing demoralization as German commanders grappled with the challenge of countering American coordination tactics. The traditional German strengths, superior individual equipment, and tactical acumen diminished in relevance when confronting an adversary that operated as a unified network rather than discrete units. Perhaps most crucially, the Shermans' communication systems presaged the future trajectory of modern warfare. The principles of robust communication, real-time coordination, and integrated systems that propelled the Shermans' effectiveness became the bedrock of contemporary military doctrine. Today's concept of network-centric warfare traces its origins to those radio-equipped tanks traversing the European continent in 1944. As the final volleys of World War II reverberated across Europe, surviving German tank crews would recall numerous elements: the terrifying whistle of incoming artillery, the grinding cacophony of tank treads, the acrid scent of cordite and burning fuel. However, what likely haunted them most was the sound of American voices, calm, coordinated, methodical, conversing their way across the continent. The Sherman tank was never the most heavily armored vehicle on the battlefield, nor was it the most heavily armed, yet it was the most connected, the most coordinated, the most aware. In a conflict where information propagated at the speed of radio waves, the Sherman bestowed upon American forces an asset that no amount of armor thickness could replicate: the capacity to think and act as a unified entity. The genius of the Sherman resided not in its steel or its armament, but in its voice. While German panzers engaged as individual gladiators, American Shermans fought as integral parts of an expansive communicating network that stretched from the front lines to divisional headquarters, linking tank to tank and crew member to crew member. They didn't merely communicate, they coordinated. They didn't just talk, they listened. Ultimately, they didn't just fight a war, they conducted one, akin to a vast mechanical orchestra where each Sherman served as both musician and sheet music, performer and conductor. The day Germany heard America talking was the day they grasped that they were not battling tanks, but engaging a thinking machine. And in the calculus of war, coordination inherently amplifies force. The Sherman tank's most significant victory was not achieved by its gun or its armor, but by its extraordinary ability to transform 50,000 individual fighting vehicles into a single, coherent, unstoppable voice of American resolve. In the final analysis, the most advanced weapon on the World War II battlefield was not forged from steel and gunpowder, but from radio waves and human synergy. And when the guns at last fell silent, it was that voice, the collective voice of American tankers talking their way to victory, that resonated longest across the liberated continent. The Sherman tank did not merely transport America's soldiers into combat, it carried America's voice. And that voice declared, with clarity and unmistakable certainty, we are present, we are synchronized, we are prevailing.